Welcome to our study group, the 4 Thoughts that Turn the Mind to Dharma. Thank you everyone for attending. So first off, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where we're all gathered. Obviously we're in different places, so we'll have different traditional custodians where we are. I think it's important to recognise that we live and practice on those lands that have been cared for centuries, if not millennia, by others. So just to begin with, we're all equal and in this together. I'm hoping that we can adopt a kind of attitude of respect for each other. Please get comfortable. It's easier to learn when we're not uncomfortable. And then take breaks as needed, so you don't need to ask permission, obviously, to take a break. Just do so. And if we could just keep our cameras and our microphones muted, that'd be great. Because it'd be rather awful if we could hear everyone going to the toilet. That would not be fun. Or it might be funny. Okay, so I don't really think I need to go over this much, but just for the sake of those who are watching the recording who don't know, I'm a Buddhist chaplain with the University of Southern Queensland's Multi-Faith Service. I'm also Associate Professor in Writing and Publishing at USQ. I'm the co-director of Jalu Buddhist Meditation Centre, which is an online meditation centre, and I've been a Buddhist practitioner for something like 4 decades-ish. So we'll just set our intention and take a moment to consider why we're here, which is we're here to benefit ourselves and others equally. We're here to connect with the true nature of our mind so that we can be free of disturbing emotions. And once we're free of disturbing emotions, that makes us fit to help other sentient beings so that they can be free of suffering as well. I'll just read 2 verses from Shantideva's Bodhisattva Way of Life. And while I'm reading this, if you could just take a moment to set your intention. May I be a guard for those without one, a guide for all who journey on the road. May I become a boat, a raft or bridge for all who wish to cross the water. May I be an isle for those desiring landfall, and a lamp for those who wish for light. May I be a place of comfort for those who need to rest, and a servant for all who live in need. So today we've already done our setting of intention. We'll do the lineage prayer, which is something that I need to do as part of my commitments. And then we'll talk about the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma, which are precious human birth, impermanence, karma, and suffering. In the second study group that we did last year, I did touch on these already, but I kind of gave like the theory. So this time we will be going over the theory a little bit, but also talking about how to actually do the contemplations, how to actually engage in a process that turns the mind toward Dharma. We can translate Dharma to mean the Buddha's teachings or to mean reality, to turn the mind towards the Buddha's teachings and also to return the mind towards reality. So that list, you're probably familiar with it: precious human birth, impermanence, karma, and suffering. We'll go through those one at a time. And then I'll give you an opportunity to ask questions if you need to, and then we'll do a dedication at the end. So first off, the lineage prayer, which is the Dujong lineage prayer for me. Feel free to do your own lineage prayer if you have one. Pristine Dharmakaya, Padma Amatayas, perfect Sambhogakaya, all holding Padma. Manifest Nirmanakaya, Lake Born Vajra. Please bless my mind, I pray. Emanation of Saraswati, Yeshi Sogyo, revealer of the 5 expanses, Zilnyon Gepa Tsal, universal Lord Jampa Deva Nima, please bless my mind, I pray. Endowed with blessings and transmissions, Gyeme Nyadon Wangpo, Lord of all 100 Buddha families, Dujom Drodro Lingpa, Root Guru, threefold in their kindness, please bless my mind, I pray. Through the blessings of invoking you in this way, having received the ripening empowerments and with pure samaya, may I perfect approach and accomplishment on the path of generation and completion, and attain the enlightened form of Samantabhadra Padmakara. So the four thoughts. The four thoughts are the preciousness of human life, the impermanence of life and all things, the truth and power of cause and effect or karma, and the pointless nature of worldly existence or suffering. So these four thoughts appear in almost all foundational teachings on Buddhism, particularly in the Tibetan tradition, but also in the Mahayana tradition, which is the tradition that is in Central and North Asia and North India. They're not always in that order. Sometimes they're switched around. Sometimes they're worded slightly differently, but the order doesn't really matter. You can do the contemplations in any order. It doesn't actually affect the outcome. But this order that I've got them in here is the order that we do them in the Dujong lineage. And I think it actually has a benefit in this order because it sort of it builds sequentially on our understanding of what actually traps us in samsara. So when we talk about the four thoughts, they're the foundation for all Buddhist practice. And as the foundation for all Buddhist practice, when we contemplate them, they give us insight into actually why we're trapped. So they're not just, they are mind training. So not training the mind to orient itself towards liberation rather than imprisonment, but they also reveal something about the nature of our existence and the delusion that we're all trapped in. Having a bit of trouble with my slides. So why contemplate them in the first place? So I just said that on the one hand, they turn our mind to Dharma, which we assume is a good thing because Dharma liberates us from suffering. On the other hand, they give us an insight about the nature of our entrapment. I'll just read this quote from Chagdu Tulku, who was a very great Lama of a number of different Nyingma lineages. He passed away a while ago. These four contemplations are the threshold of the Buddhist path. Through them, we explore both the personal relevance and universal meaning of Buddhist doctrine. After we enter the door of refuge, which means to recognize that the Buddhist teachings are a way to find freedom and help to free others, these reflections constantly strengthen and renew our practice. So these things are not things that we do at one point and then stop. They're things that we continue to do. Contemplation of precious human birth and impermanence inspires a deep renunciation of the limiting concerns of this lifetime. And then contemplation of karma and suffering brings a renunciation of cyclic existence, or what we call samsara, altogether. So those of us in the West who are not monastics, we often find the word renunciation a little bit uncomfortable. But it is a fact that without renunciation, there's no enlightenment. It's impossible. Because what is renunciation? Renunciation is to let go of that which holds us in darkness, that which traps us. It means to have no relationship with that which poisons and ensnares us. So, and of course, if you don't let go of the things that ensnare us, there's no freedom. There can be no freedom. So, although as householders, non-monastics, renunciation looks different to how it would look to a monastic, it's still essential. So, whereas a monastic has a set of vows that they hold that enforce or support a kind of internal and external renunciation. As householders, we also have vows, they're called the refuge vows, and then also the Bodhisattva precepts that support our renunciation, support us in letting go of that which ensnares us and turning away from that which causes us misery and turning towards that which can cause us to be free and to cause us to experience joy, compassion, love, well-being, equanimity, all the good feels. Okay. So another little quote from Jalu: contemplation is an important aspect of training in meditation. Focusing thoughts, refining them, reining them in when they take off on a tangent, plunging them into the topic of contemplation, then cutting them all together and resting in non-conceptual meditation. So when we talk about contemplation, often people don't really know what that means. They think it means just to think about something. But it's a very specific thing in Buddhism when we talk about contemplation. It's an aspect of meditation. So contemplation is to reflect. So what does reflect mean? It means to think about a particular thing in terms of one's own personal experience and the experience of those we know, those in the world. It means to think, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for others? And come up with examples in our mind of what it means and think about the repercussions of that, the actual impact of it on ourselves and on others. So we contemplate these things, we reflect on our experience of those things that are the focus of our contemplation at that time. Then, you know, because the mind is what it is while we're trapped in delusion, it will become distracted. So we'll start thinking about breakfast. We'll start thinking about dinner. We'll start thinking about our jobs. We'll start thinking about what we want to do on the weekend. That will pop up. And so then we need to do what we do in meditation when we become absorbed, swept away by thought, you know, which is just bring ourselves back to the contemplation. So to just bring ourselves back to that and reflect and kind of try and feel what this stuff means. And then after we've done that for a particular period of time, we can set a time if we like, then we just drop that thought process and rest in shamatha, which is a kind of meditation that you've been taught, which is just to sit in silence, sit in stillness, and just leave the mind to rest. Again, thought will come. That's the nature of thought. And then we just let it come and then let it go. Just remain sitting. And then we bring ourselves back after a little while. It's good to have a set time so that we're not constantly thinking, what time is it, what time is it, what time is it? So have a set time and have a timer that goes off when we've done our contemplated for a period of time, sat in shamatha for a period of time, timer goes off, then we go back to more contemplation or we close for the day. It's up to, I'll give you a sort of a structure in a minute about how we do this. But it's important to understand that contemplation and meditation support each other. They're not separate things. They are the same thing approached from a different angle using a different technique. So this is the structure that we use in the Dudjom tradition. So you begin by reflecting on the direct relevance of each topic to your own life and to that of others, which we were just talking about. So I'll go through each one: impermanence, precious human rebirth, impermanence, karma, suffering, in a minute. I just want to give you this structure. So this is how you do it. And then we'll go through and we'll talk about those topics in a minute. And also after we do this structure, I'll just give a little warning, a little bit of a warning. So number one, we begin reflecting on the direct relevance of each topic to your own life and to that of others. So think of examples. Think about what it feels like to experience this thing. Think about how others feel, what they go through to experience this thing. This is important. To not just it be words, to actually connect with feeling. It's really important. So number two, drop your thinking and rest in shamatha meditation. And of course, when thoughts arise, let them arise and then let them go. So we were just talking about that. So, and then number three, after a few minutes, return to your contemplation. So now what we have is, we contemplate, maybe we've set a timer for 5 minutes to contemplate the preciousness of our human existence. The timer goes off, we go into shamatha for 5 minutes. If we are distracted during shamatha, we'll bring ourselves back to our object, which is our breath or whatever we're looking at. Timer goes off, we come back to our contemplation on human rebirth, the preciousness of human rebirth. Maybe we set the timer for another 5 minutes and we contemplate again. And then after that, we rest in, we allow, number 3, after a few minutes, return to contemplation. And then in the light of your contemplation, arouse compassion for all other sentient beings. And this can happen at any stage, but I've just popped it in there because in my personal experience, it tends to be after that first round of contemplation and sitting that the contemplation actually does naturally trigger compassion to rise. But if it doesn't, you can arouse it by focusing on the aspects of your experience and others' experience that cause you to feel compassion. It's very basic, you know, so you focus on that which opens one's heart, opens your heart. So, and then make sure that when you feel compassionate, it is for oneself, of course, but also for all mother sentient beings. And why do we call them mother sentient beings? Because according to Buddhist philosophy, every being that exists has at some point been our mother, because we've been cycling around in this delusion forever. You cannot count how long. Some of our existences have been as human beings, but the number of them is very small compared to the number of times we have been other things. So we've been bugs, we've been kitty cats, we've been puppy dogs, cows, sheep, bunny rabbits, vultures, worms. You know, we've been cycling around here for so long. Awareness has been cycling around here for so long that we have been everything. We've been everything. So, and that all of those beings have been our mother at some point. Every being that exists has been our mother at some point. That's the traditional philosophical view, okay? If you don't want to believe that, that's fine. But it is important to recognize that these beings have the quality of a mother. If they haven't actually literally been our mother, if you don't want to believe that, they have the quality of being a mother in that they have care and concern for others, even in some small, tiny way. They have that capacity. So, and that's the capacity in sentient beings that we want to focus on, the mother capacity, the capacity to care, to feel concern, to want to nurture, to want to support, to want to raise up. That's the capacity that we recognize in sentient beings is important. Okay, then after our compassion has been awakened, we rest in shamatha again. And then, you know, thoughts will rise, of course, we let them go. And then after our time has gone off again, we make the wish that, this is sort of part of the closing down the process, we make the wish that all sentient beings find liberation from the conditions of cyclic existence. We're going to go over those conditions in a minute. That's essentially what the four thoughts tell us, the conditions of cyclic existence. Then rest the mind in shamatha again, you know, and these can be 2 minutes. 2 minutes, 5 minutes of contemplation, 2 minutes of shamatha. 5 minutes of contemplation, 2 minutes of shamatha. Making the wish that sentient beings be free, 2 minutes of shamatha, you know. And then finally, close your session with a dedication for sentient beings, which renews your commitment to achieve enlightenment for sentient beings' sake. So that's like the structure. You don't have to stick strictly to this structure, but this is a good structure. This is the structure that was taught to Chagdu Tulku and many other lamas. I've seen this structure in from a number of different lamas by my Lama Holiness Dudjom Rinpoche. So this is the structure that Dudjom Rinpoche taught his students, and then his students taught other students, this structure. This doesn't mean it's only structure. You can use another one. It's really important in Dharma practice to find a natural, comfortable way of doing it. That, not natural in that doesn't push our comfort zones, but comfortable in that we can do it, you know, and it is working, it works. So when we do it a particular way, what we want to see is that our contemplation of the topic at hand is evoking feeling and a deepening of understanding. Then the thing that we want to see happen is that when we go into meditation, that feeling becomes tranquility. So it might intensify at first, but then it should even out and into tranquility. And then when we make our wish for sentient, when we're wanting compassion to be there, it begins to happen naturally. We don't need to arouse it. Just in thinking of sentient beings, it happens. So that's evidence that it's working, So you find a method that works. You personalize this stuff. Personal ingenuity around practice is important. You have to apply this in a way that is meaningful to you. It's really important. Okay, so I will send the slides out to you as notes so that you have them. So this is another quote from Chagrin Tulku. The spiritual insights you gather through contemplation expand into meditative realization as you rest the mind. So there's nothing you need to do there. It just happens. Nothing is lost because you do not frame such insights in words. So that means because you have feeling, you're connecting with feeling, then when you rest in equanimity, it sort of permeates at a very deep level. Returning to active contemplation, you'll find your intellect refreshed by that moment of non-conceptual relaxation. So you see, they support each other, these two things. The contemplation works on the dualistic mind, the thinking mind, and the meditation works on the larger process and supports the other. And then, like a bird soaring on both wings in flight, contemplation and meditation together train the mind. So this is really important, that these two things, and I think something that I've noticed over the 4 decades or so that I've been a not great practitioner is that people who say to me that they've not deepened in their practice, or that their practice isn't working, or that their minds are not changing, it's because these 4 thoughts haven't taken root in their heart. They may have read through them, may have thought about them a little bit, but they haven't actually connected to feeling and then teamed it with shamatha, sitting meditation, so that it permeates the whole being. And as a result, it hasn't really taken root in the heart. And so there is no renunciation. And so if there's no renunciation, practice cannot work. I mean, it works, it has benefits, but those benefits are not, they're not deep, With renunciation and compassion, the benefits are deep, very, very, very deep and transformative. So you can feel in a way like just doing ordinary meditation with no actual Dharma thinking, no Buddhist thinking, no contemplation at all. It's very beneficial. I'm not saying it is not. It's very beneficial and quite transformative. But then to team it with a process that trains the dualistic mind, which is our major obstacle. The dualistic mind is the thing that stops us from recognizing our true nature. It's the only thing that prevents us. So training it to actually see things according to reality rather than see things according to the delusion is very powerful, very, very, very powerful. And then we'll find, interestingly, that our sitting meditation also deepens, even though they don't seem to be connected, but they are the same thing because they're both working towards what? Non-duality, the truth, reality. So because they're both working in that direction, they deepen each other, they support each other. Even though on the surface it looks like one way sort of thinking, remembering, reflecting, the other one we're not doing that at all, we're not encouraging that at all. One we are encouraging that, one we are not. But because they're both working towards non-duality, they support each other. All right. Precious human birth. So one of the things I think is important, and why I think in the Dudjom lineage we have these in this order, and in many other lineages they're in this order too. It's not rare for them to be presented in this order. It's only like a number of options around, what order they can be in. There's only 4 of them. So, but one of the benefits of this particular way of doing it is it gives us a temporary ground as well as removing the ground in the long term. So, and this is what I was talking about before about the warning. So, these contemplations can be quite unsettling. So it's important that if you have fragility, if you have trauma, if you have depression, then we need to approach this with care, and we need to approach this in a specific sort of a way. So anxiety can be triggered by this process as well. So anxiety also, you need to take care. But interestingly, in the long run, it undoes anxiety, even though it kind of triggers it at the same time. But trauma and depression, these 2 things we need to take particular care with, because they actually alter the way our mind contemplates and absorbs information. So it's a little bit like putting a sheet of paper in front of you, like over a window. The light is muted when it comes in. So, and if you only ever saw the light through that paper, you would think that's what light was, right? But when we're free of depression and trauma, we know, oh, actually, that's what light is. So, and in the same way that every kind of idea that we engage with is filtered through that, so it can be quite distorting. So what we need to make sure that we do is that we have this ground, temporary ground. This is specifically for people who have trauma and depression, okay? So if that's who we are, and I have trauma in my past, then this ground is important. And a lot of the teachings, they will sort of dive right in and focus on completely undercutting anything that we are hanging on to. But that is for people who have no history of trauma or depression. So that's like the Joe Blow, Joanne Blow, the ordinary person, the majority, who have a reasonably healthy sense of self, Those of us with trauma and depression in our past or in our present, we need to be a little bit more careful. So, having said that, this one, Precious Human Birth, can give us a little bit of a ground. They all can actually, and I'll kind of talk about the little bit of ground that each one can give, or we're kind of like, it's kind of like a sneaky thing. We need to give ourselves a little bit of ground to feel supported, so that in the long run we can undermine that which is the problem. But it's like when you're on a new medication and you titrate the dose up. You start at a low dose so that you don't shock the system, so that you can tolerate it. You don't trigger really severe side effects. The medication is going to be beneficial in the end, but you don't want to trigger really severe side effects that cause you to stop taking it at the outset. And who wants to suffer anyway? No one. It's the point of wisdom. We don't want to suffer. So this is like tightening up, the medication. So you need to give yourself a little bit of a ground, a little bit of comfort, a little bit of safety, a little bit of assurance, and self-compassion. But in the long run, we will be tightening that medication up, and in the long run, the medication will work, which will remove that which causes the problem in the first place, which is the dualistic mind, the ego or self. So, okay, Precious Human Birth. I'll just ask those of you who haven't got your microphones to mute, can you please mute them? So, in terms of Precious Human Birth, This is a good one because it enables us to feel gratitude. So, as I mentioned before, according to the Buddhist philosophy, we have been cycling around in existence for a very, very, very long time, incalculable time, and we've been everything. And only rarely have we been human. Now, to practice the Buddhist teachings, to apply them and to practice, to recognize our true nature, right, requires a human body and mind. Unfortunately, all the other beings who equally have that nature, don't have that one little thing that enables them to recognize it and be free of their fear, free of their pain, free of their misery, free of their anger, jealousy, greed, all that stuff, free of that. They don't have that one little extra thing. Only humans have that. So when we're contemplating this, we contemplate the fact that we have the ability as human beings to apply reason, logic to our situation so that we can overcome fear, anxiety, jealousy, anger, etc. We can overcome these things ourselves, if shown how, we can do it. Unfortunately, other beings cannot do that. So they are literally the victims of their fear, the victims of their insecurity, the victims of their anger, the victims of their pain. They can't apply any kind of antidote to that, to be free of that. So it means that as human beings, we have a huge gift, a huge opportunity. It also means we should really take note of those beings who cannot help themselves out of their fear, out of their misery. They need us, actually, to do that for them. So, which is why beings who don't have that opportunity are our responsibility. All the other sentient beings are our responsibility because they don't have the faculty that we have, which is we can be free of pain, we can be free of fear, we can be free of misery, we can be free of grasping, we can be free of aversion, we can be free of ignorance. We can recognize our true nature. This is amazing, and it's rare. It's really rare. It seems like at the world, this planet, there's 7 billion-ish human beings. So it doesn't seem very rare, But according to the traditional Buddhist teachings, to be a human is like to be one grain of sand in all the universe of sand. It's a lot. A lot of sand in the universe, So to be a human being is to be one grain of sand. That's how rare it is. So, and another metaphor they use is that, if all of the universes were a vast ocean and swimming in that ocean were a turtle, a blind turtle, and floating on the surface of that vast ocean was a yoke or wheel, the odds of attaining a human birth, a human existence, is equal to, and that turtle only rises to the surface once every 100 years. So the odds of us having a human existence is the likelihood of that turtle in the vast universe rising in exactly the same place as that yoke or wheel that's being tossed around on the turbulent ocean surface. At the same time they come together, the odds of that are very, very, very thin. So our human existence is incredibly precious, important, and rare. So, don't waste it, is essentially the message. To be human gives us the ability to recognize our true nature, which frees us from suffering. No other being has that opportunity, and it's the only thing, here's the rub, it's the only thing that differentiates us from all other sentient beings. In our nature, all other beings are exactly the same as us, exactly the same. Mosquitoes, dung beetles, elephants, lions, kitty cats, puppy dogs, piggies, cows, sheep, goats, birds, exactly the same in every way. There's a little bit of a difference between insects and us, because they don't have quite the same mind. But, you know, the scientific research shows that the density in terms of a bird's brain and a bee's brain are very similar. And in terms of number of brain cells, you know, in terms of its size and stuff. And this is similar to us. So birds and other mammals, they have very similar mind states to us. They feel fear, they feel pain, they experience grief, they experience attachment, they get hungry, they get irritated and annoyed. They're exactly the same as us, exactly the same. There's only one difference, and that's the ability that we have to, essentially, to meditate. Although some say that cats meditate, which I'm not wholly convinced they're properly meditating. They seem to do that. So, you know, it's the only difference. So given that's the only thing we have that makes us different to other sentient beings, that then should be our focus. This ability to recognize our true nature, to practice the Dharma, to practice the Buddhist teachings, should then, if it's the only thing that we have that's different, that's special and rare, that should be our focus. Our attachments are not rare or special or different. Animals and bees and, you know, worms have them, have attachments. Animals have anger and fear. Animals have love and kindness. Animals have hunger and thirst. Animals get horny, like humans get horny. All of these things, they're the same. The one thing that is different is our ability to recognize our nature. So that really should be our focus. Because it makes you wonder, okay, so if becoming human is so rare, which even if you just compare on this planet, the number of humans to the number of insects, I mean, they vastly outnumber us, So even on this planet, we can see that being human is rare in compared to what other kinds of beings are here. You don't have to get metaphysical about it at all. Just look around. So given it is rare, given the only difference is this ability of ours to recognize true nature and thus help others, you know, ordinary kindness is not unique to humans, but boundless compassion is. The ability to have compassion for all sentient beings irrespective of what they're like. That's unique to us, because why? Not because it's a quality associated with humans, but because it's a quality associated with the true nature, which we can awaken in ourselves, and they cannot. So they can have compassion and kindness, but they can't have boundless compassion in the way that we can as human beings. This shows us our responsibility. Our responsibility is to awaken to our true nature and to liberate others. Those who can't be liberated because of the form they're in, our responsibility is to care for them, protect them, make sure they don't get hurt, do whatever we can to prevent them from being harmed. That's our responsibility as human beings. Now, there are some ordinary worldly benefits to being human as well. And, you know, there's no point pretending they're not there, and there's no point denying them. We can experience pleasure. We can have joyous relationships. We can make art. We can sing and dance. We can have fun. Of course, animals do a lot of that stuff too. But being human means that we can bring our awareness to that stuff. So we can make that stuff quite deeply moving. So there is joy in being a human being as well as the responsibility. And there's also a promise of liberation, which I think is really important. Okay, so that's the precious human birth. So the next ones are all a little bit challenging. So, but this one, that we have this opportunity for freedom, it gives us a little bit of a ground. And it's not a samsaric ground. It's not a dualistic, ego-based ground. It's a ground based on, oh, there's an opportunity for freedom. That's the ground, something to stand on that isn't going to undo us or hamper us in any way. Okay. Impermanence. Now, we all know that change is a thing. Change is a thing. So sometimes when we talk about impermanence, there's a lot of bypassing that goes on because we think we know, we think we understand this. We intellectually understand that nothing is permanent, nothing. Everything that we've ever held in our hands has either already gone or will go very soon or will go soon-ish, you know. Because we live 115-ish years at the max at the moment, there can be a sense of permanence, but 115 years is nothing compared to the, you know, the time that human beings have been here, number one, the time that the planet's been here, number two. We also know that suns, which have been around for 1 million years or more, many millions of years sometimes, they cease to exist. They go dark. Everything is impermanent. We need to recognize that fact and feel it. We can't just go, oh yeah, everything changes, nothing's permanent. You know, we know that the seasons turn, that each day the sun moves, the moon moves, the wind moves, nothing stays the same. But we read, you know, those things as somehow stable because they have a bit of a duration to them. They're not at all stable. You know, in the long run, the sun will not rise. In the long run, the moon will not rise. In the long run, the breeze will stop blowing. In the long run, that is what will happen. So, but even if we just look at it from our little tiny space of our human existence, even though we can't see the end of these things, we can see the changing nature of these things. So impermanence is not just that things end, it's that things constantly change. They do not remain stable. So, you know, the breeze is always blowing, the sun is here, then it's there. One day it's rainy, next day it's sunny. You know, it's constant change. If you look at our bodies, we're born little tiny things, and then we're bigger things. We had nice fine skin until we're about 25. Now it's all wrinkled, you know. We had capacities we had when we were younger, we no longer have. We have capacities now that we didn't have when we were younger. Our bodies totally changed, not just through puberty, but through other things. Like, and if you're female, menopause is happening for many of you, you know. So if you're male, your testosterone levels drop and you start to feel weepy, you know. It changes, the body changes itself. But because we look at it every day in the mirror, we clock all of those minute changes and no longer see them. We don't see them. But if we look at a picture of ourselves, and this is a good practice, look at a picture of ourselves when we were 8 years old, then look at a picture of ourselves when we were 18, then 25, and then a decade later if we're older than that. And just look at how, is this the same person? Physically, this is not the same person. We know from medical science that, I don't know the exact timeframes, but every single cell in our body changes, it dies and is replaced. So I think it's about a year, something like that. So from year to year, there's not a single cell that was here before, a year ago. So the bones completely change. So everything completely changes. So we are not in any way stable. We're constantly changing and we're impermanent. So it's important to recognize this. Why? Because our belief in an eternal tomorrow distracts us. So we were talking before about what's the great blessing and privilege of being human, our ability to recognize our true nature, number one, our ability to engage in boundless compassion and help others, number two. What stops us from doing that, from doing those things? I believe in eternal tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. You know, I don't know how many times, this is embarrassing, but I don't know how many times I've said, I'll go on a diet tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to go on a diet. You know, I mean, I don't have a huge weight problem, but I've got slightly high blood pressure and I've got diabetes in my family. So dropping a bit of weight would be beneficial. You know, I'm not one of these people who believes you need to be thin to be healthy at all, but I've got some health problems in my family that are genetic, you know. So dropping a bit of weight would alleviate some of those problems, you know. And but also, you know, like, so every night I probably have thought tomorrow I'll, eat different. Tomorrow I will not have, 2 sugars. I have two cups of tea a day. I'm quite a habitual person. And I have 1 teaspoon of sugar in each cup of tea. And so regularly I will think to myself, okay, tomorrow I'll just have 1 cup of tea. But then the day comes, I think, I will do it tomorrow. And I have 2 cups of tea again, So we believe in this perpetual tomorrow, which stops us from practicing. Because we're always thinking, I will practice tomorrow. I will practice tomorrow. But it might not come. The likelihood of it coming is shockingly thin when you really engage with the numbers of tomorrow happening for us. So because I'm 53, and because I've had a number of tomorrows, I am convinced, in my deluded nature, that I will have more of these tomorrows. Tomorrows are something that I've got, Not true. The actual stats are fairly compelling if you look at the maths. The likelihood of me waking up tomorrow is not great. It's not something to put one's confidence in. It's not at all likely. So anything could happen. The random nature of life. So we need to do what? Because of this reality. The other thing is we need to practice Dharma, long and short of it. But the other thing is about impermanence. It causes a lot of suffering. So when we believe things are permanent, we're distraught when they prove not to be, which is like a lunatic expecting their delusions to suddenly become real, It's like when somebody believes that Napoleon faces the reality that they are not, they fully freak out. Causes us a lot of suffering. The belief in permanence is a profound delusion, and it causes us a huge amount of suffering. Permanence is a problem. So, we think we enter into a relationship. This is forever. I love this person. That will always stay the same. Sadly, that's not true. Often that relationship sours, that relationship ends, or one of the people dies. It's a tragedy, but it's a truth that bears remembering. We have pets that we adore. Of course they die. I've lost a number of pets in my lifetime. It's been every single time. It's deeply distressing and disturbing. I cry and cry and cry and cry, and I grieve and grieve and grieve and grieve. But, still, somehow I feel surprised that they've passed away. It's our delusion is quite profoundly disturbing. If we recognized the reality of death and the imminent nature of it, not only would we not so completely blindsided by it when it happens, we actually would take more care and time with those in our lives, because we would see this is really a valuable moment because it could be the last one. There are not going to be many of these moments. So be kind in this moment, show love in this moment, support that person or that kitty cat, puppy dog, or dog, cow, or whatever, whatever we love. Show them love and support and care in each moment, because that moment might not come again. Now, a little bit of ground here. Even though everything's impermanent, everyone will die. There's absolutely no avoiding it. Even though every thought that rises in our mind dies and is vanished, gone forever, every emotion we ever feel also likewise rises, dies, goes away. Even though everything is lost already, right? Which is quite a disturbing thing. Impermanence has a promise. If our minds were permanent, liberation, enlightenment would not be possible. We would not be able to change. We would remain mired in delusion forever. So here's the ground in this one. We can stand on the fact that our impermanence, the impermanent nature of the mind in particular, means, enlightenment's possible. Freedom from suffering is possible. So all this suffering we experience because of impermanence, likewise, impermanence can be the freedom from it. If we recognize it, our minds change. They cease to cling. They cease to grab hold of and hold on to things tightly that it is irrational to hold on to tightly. We then hold on to things gently, with care and concern. It's a different kind of touch. We're not grasping and wanting. It's like a touch of kindness. We're holding that thing with great care because it is precious while it's there. So, and although there's so much suffering, impermanence itself is the cause and the antidote. So this is an interesting thing. It's often something you find when you look closely at reality. The things that cause us to suffer, if we simply change our attitude, we simply shift our perception, we accept, we stop running away, we stop pretending, we stop the cycle of denial, and also seeing its opportunity. Precious human rebirth brings with it a lot of suffering, physical pain. Birth itself is a traumatic experience, old age, or sickness, old age, death. None of that's fun, none of that's good. But human rebirth also has potential for awakening, has the ability to be compassionate. So those are great things. So the thing that causes suffering itself is also a source of freedom. Likewise, impermanence causes us a lot of suffering, but if we reorient ourselves towards it, stop pretending it's not the reality of things, and see its opportunity in that it's an opportunity for liberation. The mind's impermanent, so it can change. Then it becomes a source of joy. Impermanence becomes a source of joy. So that's a little bit of ground there. So we'll move on to the next one now. Actually, we'll have a break for 5 minutes so people can have some water and or visit bathrooms, etc. And then we'll go on to talk about karma. So I'll just pause the recording now. Okay, so we're back from our break and we're going to move on to karma. Before we move on to karma though, I just wanted to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning with the how to do it. So we've been through human rebirth and impermanence. So if you're going to do this, you would start with human rebirth. I think doing them in a sequential order is of value. Excuse me. So start with human rebirth. And you literally just think and you think about, you can do a bit of reading. I'll send you actually some pages from Jagdud Tulku's commentary on these things as a PDF. So you can, I think he does there's about 2 pages on each of these contemplations. I've also written a thing, Jamie and I have written a thing together on impermanence, which I can send to you. And also I've written something on karma. So I send those to, which is quite short, so I send those to you. But so you can do a bit of reading, right? And then you reflect. And you just think about how your human rebirth is an opportunity. That's the essence of it. How should we feel? Why should we feel grateful for being human? And then consider what our responsibility is as a human being and what our opportunities are as a human being. So, and I've ad nauseum, I've said, the responsibility is we're able to lift ourselves up out of our disturbing emotions. So it is our responsibility, therefore, to limit the suffering that impacts others. Every single other sentient being is our responsibility. I know that seems huge, but that's the Buddhist take. Every single sentient being is our responsibility. So we do what we can with that responsibility. So we limit the amount of harm we cause. It's impossible to live a life without any harm at all. If you drive a car, sentient beings are smashing on your windscreen all the time, particularly if you drive at night. If you walk in a park, you're stepping on sentient beings in the park. If you know, let alone if you eat meat, cheese, milk, etc. So it's impossible to completely avoid harming others. We also inadvertently harm human beings all the time. We say unkind things, we say insensitive things without it. We don't even mean to hurt people, but we do. We say insensitive things. It hurts others. You know, so it's impossible to be completely, you know, without harming others. It's impossible to do that. You cannot do it. But we do whatever we can with our resources, within our resources, to limit the amount of harm we cause. So if you can, you know, avoid driving at night, avoid driving at night, you know. It saves a lot of sentient beings. If you can avoid eating meat, avoid eating meat. If you can avoid drinking milk and eating cheese, avoid drinking milk and eating cheese. Do whatever you can in terms of your ability, your own, you know, resources and your health also. For example, it would be kind of nuts to have a rule about not driving at night and therefore not drive to the hospital when you're sick at night. It doesn't make sense. You know, obviously you need to put your well-being on an equal footing with other sentient beings. So whatever is within your ability to do and doesn't harm you, as you know, it doesn't become a harm for yourself, do it. Do whatever you can. Now, in terms of, so I kind of always overlay with that point. Anyway, in terms of the contemplation, you sit, you think about, okay, what about my life is an opportunity? What are the responsibilities? Given there's just this one difference between human beings and all other sentient beings, should I perhaps put my focus on that, on recognizing my true nature, on doing Dharma practice, Buddhist practice? Should that not be my priority? Contemplate it and see what the answer is. See if the answer is yes. You know, I know that some people come up with all kinds of reasons why other things are more important. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. I'm laughing again. But it isn't funny. So lots of other people have lots of reasons for why they're more important than other sentient beings. Lots of reasons. They give me lots of reasons. They have lots of reasons why they can't practice or don't practice. But, and I'm not being mean. I'm not being, you know, I'm not judging other people. But I have yet to hear a reason that stands up. You know, I've yet to hear a reason for why people don't want to help others that stands up. And I've yet to hear a reason why people don't practice stands up. There isn't one. In my humble opinion, there is not one. Time is the one usually thrown at me, or sometimes there are fairly major situational events, you know, like they've got care responsibilities that take up a lot of time. But my answer in that situation is, well, that's your practice. You know, often people think practice has got to be this particular thing, but compassion is practice, and you can apply awareness to everything you do. So being busy is not an excuse for not practicing. Anyway, so you go through that, you go through the contemplations, and then you sit in equipoise, in shamatha meditation, and then you go back to the contemplation, back to equipoise, in terms of that structure I gave you earlier. So but it's really important that we connect with feeling. So we should feel grateful, not just know that we should be grateful, you know, for being human. We should feel grateful. There should be, and gratitude brings with it a sense of joy. So there should be a feeling of sort of joy that we're human, gratitude that we're human, but also a sense of responsibility, which should manifest, if you're not getting hung up in guilt, it should manifest as motivation. If your responsibility, if you're feeling responsible for sentient beings, and it's coming from a selfless place, it is motivating. If you're feeling that responsibility for sentient beings as a burden and it's weighing you down, then there's still quite a bit of self-clinging there. The clinging to self is exhausting. And when you add into that something vast like, the welfare of all sentient beings, that becomes exhausting. But if it's selfless, if it's not about you at all, it's actually about them, about others, it is actually energizing and motivating. So that's how you can sort of see. If you feel exhausted and worn out by your compassionate activity or care activity or something, then it tells me, there's self-clinging there. If, however, you feel energized and motivated, to act, to take it into the world, then that means there's not so much self-clinging there. We all have self-clinging. There's no point beating up ourselves about that. It is the nature of being in a human body to be self-clinging. So, but we can undo that by feeling the gratitude first, and then understanding our responsibility. Okay, so literally you need to sit, you need to feel, and then you need to be in shamatha for a few minutes after each contemplation session. The two things have to be done together. All right, we'll move on to karma now. So karma is a tricky thing. If we're coming from a traditional place, the Buddhist doctrine on karma says karma is a exacting, precise, ruthless force. That means in all of our previous lives, everything we've done, good or bad, has accrued karma, and that karma will come home to roost. So the traditional Buddhist, well, actually there's the classical, that's a better word, the classical Buddhist understanding of karma is different to the early understanding of karma at the time of the Buddha, and different again from what I'm going to say about karma, which is more a I don't like using this word, Wuzogchen kind of position. So the classical, I'm just giving you all three, right? The classical position, which is the dominant position, it's the position if you meet an Asian Buddhist, like a Buddhist from an Asian country who is also Asian, who grew up in a Buddhist country, and you ask them about karma, they'll say it's a precise, ruthless, kind of brutal, exacting force, mystical force that slaps you down for every bad thing you ever did in all your previous existences, or lifts you up for every good thing you ever did in all your previous existences. That's the classical Buddhist view. By classical, I mean the time frame when Buddhism became dominant across most of Asia. So not the early period when the Buddha taught and when Buddhism was contained within basically northern India, northern Pakistan, Afghanistan, when it was contained in that sort of zone. That's the early Buddhist period. But that's a classical view. That's the view you'll likely have encountered already. Now, the early view and the Dzogchen view are actually the same, pretty much. So that's interesting to me. So that view says that karma is the mind's habits. That's it. Karma is the mind's habits. So if the mind is angry, now, future mind will be angry, right? If the mind was angry in the past, this current mind will be angry. If the mind is greedy in the past, the mind now will be greedy, and the future mind will be greedy. It's very simple. You can't get apples from a tree that grew from a lemon seed. You cannot. So if you allow anger to take root in your mind, the fruit will be anger. It's very simple, very simple. If you encourage kindness and compassion to take root in the mind, the fruit will be kindness and compassion. Very simple. So in the early dissemination of Buddhism, the early teaching of karma, they talk about karma producing this thing called, it's badly translated into the word merit. So the original words for that were punya and kusala. Two words for the same thing. One, kusala, means the lemon seedy nature of lemon seeds, in essence, of the virtuousness, or the wholesomeness, or the ethicalness of the mind or of actions, the character of them, the quality of them. So a mind could be kusala, wholesome, ethical, and actions could be wholesome, ethical, right? Then punya means the effect one experiences when one has an ethical mind. And that punya is what is often translated into the word merit in the West, and that is the source of obsession for many practicing Buddhists, because they're kind of missing the point. So merit is when you are ethical, how do people react to you? They respect you. When you're compassionate and kind, how do people react to you? They're usually compassionate and kind back. So it's that experience you have when your mind is ethical. The world mirrors your ethical nature back. It respects you. It's not magical at all. It's very, very, very precise and here and now. Now, the classical view of Buddhism is if something happens to you in this life, say you're born with cancer, so you're a little baby and you're born with cancer, that has one source and one source only. The baby in a previous existence did something terrible and the karma is coming home to roost. So if you're walking down the street and some rando comes up and punches you in the head, the classical Buddhist position is, it's not the rando's fault, it's your fault. Sometime in the past, you created the causes for that to come home to roost. So that's a classical position. I'm telling you so you understand in Buddhism why sometimes there's a discomfort with negative experiences. It's because according to the classical position, they're our fault. They're wholly and completely our fault. They have nothing to do with anyone else. There's no one else to blame. They're wholly our fault. So you can do with that what you like. My position about that is irrelevant because it doesn't matter what I think. But the early view of karma and the kind of Dzogchen view of karma is not that. It is simply that in samsara, while beings are here, shit happens. Bad shit happens to everyone. Now, according to the classical position on karma, bad shit can't happen to good people. They can be good in this life, but they were bad in the previous one, right? So if you find yourself in a war, you know, and you are killed, it's your doing, no one else's, not the war's, not the person who killed you. It's your doing. However, the early view and the Dzogchen view is different, which is that you can be a wholly good person, but still mired in samsara. So this is not a Buddha. Bad things can't happen to Buddhas because they're not mired, they're not trapped, right? So you can be a really good person, but because you're in samsara, crap will happen to you, and it's inevitable. It's inevitable, unavoidable. You can pick or choose which of those things you want to buy into. You don't have to buy into either, actually. You can have your own. You can have your own model. You know, the model in the West to become dominant in the West is equally unhealthy in my view, which is that the individual is primary, and anything negative that happens to the individual is someone else's fault. There's someone else to blame. So that's an unhealthy model as well, because it means that our participation in everything is not taken into account. So, you know, even in accidents, our presence is important. It's not like we're just mute and dumb and don't have any power, don't have any agency, don't have any mind to change, to experience, to adapt. You know, if everything bad that happens has to have some evil outside cause, we just won't respond to what happens to us in transformative ways. We'll just remain kind of stuck. Anyway, karma is tricky because we have a number of different models of it floating around. That classical one I talked about, it is the Hindu view of Buddhism. Oh, sorry, it is the Hindu view of karma that has, because Hinduism and Buddhism in the classical period in particular were usually practiced together. So there wasn't a separation in the classical period. People were practicing Hinduism and Buddhism together for centuries. So this Hindu view of karma has become something that is widely disseminated in Buddhism. But if you look at the early teachings of the Buddha, he quite strongly refutes it. That's my position. It's a number of other scholars' position. Not that I'm a scholar, but that's, you know. But there's a lot of Buddhist scholars who would likewise argue that that's not true. It's a debate. But what you have to do is ask yourself, look at the teachings of the Buddha. What seems more likely? That we would have some eternal force that defies everything else in Buddhism, which is that everything's impermanent, everything's empty. Nothing survives death. That's the profound teaching of the Buddha. You know, but somehow this thing called karma does. You know, it's a tricky thing. But you have to figure out for yourself where you sit on this one. But for us now, in terms of our practice, in terms of using the idea of karma to turn our mind towards Dharma, what does it really mean? It means using that early view or the Dzogchen view, it doesn't mean that we can be less careful about our behavior, less ethical. It means we have to be more ethical, actually, much more ethical, because nothing's deferred to another life. Nothing's later. It's right now. Everything's right now. Everything's really important now. So we have to be super ethical in our behavior right now. And why is that? Because when we're unethical, the habit of the mind becomes unethical. So the habit of the mind is anger. The habit of the mind is greed. The habit of the mind is blame, to blame others. The habit of the mind is to cling. The habit of the mind is to be jealous. The habit of the mind is to be insecure. The habit of the mind is to be self-loathing and self-hating. Those are not the kind of mind that are conducive to recognizing your own true nature. They're the opposite to recognizing the true nature. The mind that is conducive to recognizing the true nature, becoming enlightened, is a mind that is ethical, kind, and that's it. Very simple. Ethics, a lack of ethics blocks realization. It just blocks it because the mind becomes what it does. So it becomes angry. Angry mind can't be awakened, cannot be. The anger has to be dropped first. So you see, either model of this, either the model you look at in terms of karma, in any way you look at it, your conduct is important to your awakening. It's super important. Every harmful thing you do will come home to roost. Not in that mystical sense, but right now, people will just not like you. That's the simplest thing. If you are mean, people will not like you. People will not care if you're injured. People will not care if you're sick. People will not care if you're lonely. You will have no support. That's what will happen. So, if you want other beings to respond to you kindly, with kindness, and support you in your life and in your practice, you have to be kind. There's no other option. You have to subdue negative behaviors. There's no other choice. Even animals, my Lama, Nakpa Kamalunja Rinpoche, one of my many lamas, often points out that cats and dogs and birdies and, little children, they won't go near an angry person. They are frightened of angry people, They won't, but likewise, they are wary and suspicious of frightened people. It's contagious, the fear. But, a non-traumatized, normal puppy dog is going to respond to affection by rolling over on its back and wanting its belly rubbed. It will be loving. That's its response. Its response to kindness is openness, complete love back. Same with children. If you are loving and kind to children, they respond with loving kindness. It's really not hard to figure it out. If you're angry, jealous, envious, selfish, people will just not respond to you in a way that is conducive to your awakening, and not conducive to your ordinary life either. Your ordinary life will also be mired with problems. This is why karma is super important. You can totally drop the idea of karma completely if you want. I don't care what you believe or don't believe. It's not about that. Whether you believe in karma or not, it's a reality. But you can frame it, if you like, if it's more suitable for you, more beneficial, as ethics. Very simple. And the fact that every ethical action will have a positive result for you and others. Every unethical action will have a negative result for you, because the habit of the mind will change negatively, and others, right? Either way you look at it, you can't separate cause from effect. Every single thing you do has an effect on others and on yourself. Karma is real. Just depends which model you want to pick up, That's up to you, your decision. But you can do that in your contemplations when you're thinking about karma. The fact that whatever you do affects your mind. Whatever you do affects others. So therefore, what are our choices? Given that everything we do affects our mind and could become an obstacle to enlightenment, and everything we do could harm others, what should we do? Do the contemplation. And I think you'll find that the answer is we need to live very ethically, we need to live very frugally, we need to live very simply, and we need to have kindness as our primary modus operandi. That needs to be our life philosophy. To be compassionate and kind is not hard, it doesn't hurt to do so, and it is incredibly beneficial to the mind and to others. It's fairly logical and practical. All right. I hope I haven't said anything too heretical about karma. I know that there's these three models, and if you're in one, they tend to view people who hold others as heretics or something. And if it's just very, It's a tricky thing, but you do have to figure it out for yourself, because there's no point just taking on dogma. This is what karma is. Even what I said, this is what karma is. Do the contemplations and see where you fall, what you think. Buddha said, analyze things, contemplate them, see how they're true or not true for yourself. It's important. You can do that in your contemplations, and then you sit in meditation. And I often find when you're sitting in meditation, when you come back to your contemplation, something about the contemplation has changed. There's something there now that wasn't there before. It's not a dualistic mind thing. Some kind of wisdom emerges. It's like you start to sort of see, I understand how this works now. So you have to do the contemplations to really get it. Suffering. Okay, so I've laboured suffering a lot. Oh, and the thing about the ground, if you have trauma or depression, the ground in karma is, it's very easy to get a positive result. Very, very easy. If your philosophy is to be kind, right? It doesn't need to be, you don't need to be, giving everything you own away, like that kind of generosity. You don't need to be so intensely patient that people think, what are they saying? Those things are fine. Generosity, patience, they're really good things, but they can all be subsumed under kindness. It's very simple. You don't have to do your head in with thinking about how to avoid bad karma. It's very simple. Just be kind. And it's very simple and will have strong positive result for you. So the ground in the karma one is to understand I can radically transform the quality of my life by living ethically. I can reduce harm to others. People will be more loving and kind towards me, and my mind will have a more pleasant quality. The other thing about kindness and compassion, they're pleasant states. They're not unpleasant states. They're not suffering. To feel kindness to others, to feel compassion for others is not an unpleasant state. It's a pleasant state. So there's a benefit to oneself as well. So, suffering. This is really a big one. So, the traditional Buddhist position is that we're all cycling around, so having an existence. We're born, we get sick, we age, we die. We're born as a rabbit this time. We get sick, we age, we die. We're born as a praying mantis this time. We don't get to age because our partner eats our head off. We're reborn, we get sick, we age, we die, etc., 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 etc. And none of that is good. None of it is good. Our existence is permeated by constant dissatisfaction, if not outright misery. There are brief moments of joy, there may even be years of contentment, but fundamentally they end. Those interludes of positive experience end. Suffering also ends, which is one of the upsides to impermanence on that front. All the suffering we experience also passes. But there's one unavoidable suffering that even when we think we're contented, remains. And that is the delusion that says, or that we buy into, or that we believe, or that we hold dear, that we're here and all other beings are there. There is a here and now. There is a there and then. There is a past. There is a future. There is a self, there is an other. All of that is a complete delusion. And even if we're enjoying the delusion, the people who think they're Napoleon or Cleopatra, they can have great romps. They can romp around, really having fun, believing they're Napoleon or Cleopatra, really thoroughly enjoying it, actually. but it's not actually positive because they're completely cut off from reality. And there is no hope while they're cut off from reality, or we're cut off from reality, of awakening to our true nature, which is better than being Napoleon or being Cleopatra, you know? Sometimes when I use that metaphor, people go, oh, but you know, if you're like in that kind of deluded state, like, you know, you don't know any better and so it's perfectly fine. But the true nature is so beyond being Napoleon or Cleopatra in terms of its coolness or pleasantness or beauty or joy, that even though they don't know about it, even though we don't know about it, you know, that doesn't mean it's okay to be denied it or to deny ourselves it. So nothing in the samsaric world that we could be holds a candle to what we already truly are. You know, like anything we could achieve in a worldly way here in samsara, in this delusion, is, you know, a little tiny candle flame compared to like a billion suns, what our nature is. There just is no comparison, and it's a tragedy that we're cut off from our nature. It is a tragedy. So even though, you know, you might have a great relationship, you might have a great job, you might have no real health problems, you might not have experienced death recently, you know, you might not have experienced death for decades, you might not have lost anything major, you might not have had any serious setbacks, you know. Such people do exist. They're very, very rare, but I believe there might be one or two out there who have a really fine life, you know, perfectly fine life for now. That's the bit, for now. It will all go away. And even at the best, even at our best in this samsaric world, it's nothing compared to what our nature is and can give to the world. So that's the most profound suffering, which is the suffering of what we call ignorance. And what is ignorance? Ignorance is not knowing who we really are, what we really are, not knowing what we really are. Being disconnected from the truth of reality. That's the profound suffering. And it's an interesting one, because even when we're, you know, when we're really happy and, you know, we're madly in love, or we're like just loving what we're doing, you know, we're winning the Olympics, you know, whatever, that suffering remains. We don't feel it, but it remains. The separation remains. We just haven't recognized that that separation is itself the problem. You know, we think the real problem is sickness, old age and death, poverty, abuse, wars. You know, we think those are the problems. The real problem, which is the source of all that, is that we have not recognized our true nature. Once you recognize the true nature, all that vanishes. So even though we might not feel like we're suffering, we are. But then there's all the suffering that we actually feel. Everything we gain, we lose. Everything we want, you know, it's hit or miss if we get it. And if we get it, we'll lose it. The things that we don't want, they all come home to roost. You know, we don't want to age, we age. We don't want to die, we die. We don't want people to dislike us, they dislike us. We don't want to get sick, even if it's just the flu, but we get sick, you know. We cannot stop the things we don't want from coming home. So there's all that ordinary suffering, poverty, illness, death, all of that, abuse, cruelty, all of that. There's all of that. And that is enough, really, to be wanting to be done with it, to be done with this delusional cycle we're in. But add on to that the kind of profoundly just inconceivable loss that is not knowing your true nature, like that, and it's a loss we don't feel day to day, you know. Deep practitioners do feel it, and it is a profound loss. There's no other way to describe it. Anyway, so when we're doing our contemplations on suffering, we can think about all of that, horror, abuse, violence. Sure, think about that stuff. But the ground here, but don't forget, the actual cause of all that, the actual root of all that suffering, the actual root of all fear, all anger, all violence, all envy, all jealousy, all greed is attachment to self, a fictional self that doesn't actually exist. That delusion is actually the root of all suffering. There's only one way to be free of that, and that's to practice Dharma. And that can be Buddhist Dharma, Hindu Dharma, Christian Dharma, Muslim Dharma, Jewish Dharma, whatever you want, whatever kind of Dharma you want. But if it's not working towards non-duality, which is actually rare, in Buddhism it's pretty much everything's practicing towards non-duality, but in many of the other traditions there are practices that work towards non-duality, but mostly there are practices that don't. I don't, no disrespect to those traditions, they do have an essential kind of core that leads you to non-duality, but they also have a lot of stuff that doesn't. So make sure what you're doing or what you're chasing or what you're pursuing or practicing is actually undoing non-duality. So in your sitting, you think about all the suffering in the world, all your own losses, all of everyone else's losses, the vastness of that, and the complete unavoidable nature of it, because it is samsara. That's the nature of it here. But the ground is actually also the ground of your own nature, which is that the true suffering is to be disconnected from one's true nature. That we can fix, that we can resolve, that we can turn around. So yes, there's sadness, a great deal of sadness around all of the suffering. And I mean, I feel every single day a deep despair. But there's also this fact. You can be free, and all other beings can be free. The world is a shithole, but the world is an illusion. In reality, all of this is something else. And we need to figure out what that is, and the only way to do that is to practice Dharma. So I think you should do these consecutively. You don't have to listen to me. But I think human birth, the ground of that one, the one that helps us to feel some kind of support until we get through it all, is the profound opportunity for liberation in being human, which is rare. Then impermanence. Yes, unsettling, disturbing, but the ground there is the mind can change. The mind's fully impermanent. It can change. Who we think we are is not abiding. Enlightenment is possible because of impermanence, because of the dynamic nature, because this is actually a fiction. The truth is our true nature. So there's the ground there, something to give you something to hang on to while you work through these and you turn your mind away from samsara. Then karma, the ground there is, this is easy. Just be kind in each situation. Just go, what's the kind thing here? And do that. It's not complicated. You don't need an ethics degree. Sometimes we'll make mistakes. That's okay. Just make every effort to be kind. Very simple, very easy. And a mind that is kind is a mind that is open, non-grasping, and will recognize its nature more easily, its true nature more easily. Then with suffering, tough. It is tough. You can't shy away from it. But again, we have a solution already. The solution is to be free, to recognize our true nature, which frees us. Teach others how to recognize their true nature. And in the meantime, until we recognize our true nature, we are kind. We teach others to be kind. We encourage others to be kind. We support kindness wherever we can. Through voting, through donating, through the kind of work we do, through how we relate to our friends and family, through our pets. You know, if we have pets, be kind to them. If we don't have pets, be kind to wild animals that are around. You know, there are things we can do in the meantime while we're waiting to awake, or we're not waiting to awake, while we're moving towards awakening to our true nature. So I don't want to, I tried not to be too negative here, should sort of dwell on the negative, but the cold, hard fact about samsara, which is this delusion we're in, the world, is that there is nothing in it that you want. If we were sane, you wouldn't want anything in it. You wouldn't want a thing. You would turn away from it completely because it is a trap. It is a dualistic nest of vipers. It's really dramatic. But, you know, hope and fear, blame and praise, fear and infamy, etc. That's what this is about. You're either running from one or chasing the other. Running towards hope, running away from fear, running towards praise, running away from blame, running towards fame, running away from infamy, you know, or good reputation, bad reputation, however you want to translate that. Running away from pain, running towards pleasure. You know, this is just it. This is what it is, and there's nothing in it that is of any value at all. These contemplations show you that, but also, as soon as you see it, that there's nothing here that is of any, it doesn't deserve your time. There's nothing here that deserves your time. Then you're free. Suddenly, all the stuff that weighed you down, that took up so much of your time, you just don't care about anymore. You know, you don't care about any of it. All you care about is recognize your own true nature so that you can free beings. That becomes everything. And of course, it doesn't mean you suddenly abandon everyone in your life, because those are sentient beings too. You're doing it for them as well. Your care for them does not diminish, it increases. Your responsibility for them does not diminish, it increases, right? But the relationships that are really unhealthy and toxic, those you drop quite quickly, because you're like, what's the point? There's nothing here. Why would I put myself through it? You know? And any kind of like indecision we have about should I do that, should I do this, is it goes. Because you know, if I do that, I'll have less time to practice Dharma. I'm less likely to awaken to my true nature, so I'm not going to do it. If I do that, I'll have more time to practice Dharma. I'm more likely to awaken to my nature and be able to help sentient beings, so I'm going to do that. You know, decisions become easy, very, very easy. So that's the benefit of it. And although there is sadness in recognizing the reality we're in, there's also a huge opportunity in that the reality we're in is just a delusion and we can be free of it. I mean, when we look at the world, it seems so real. It seems so solid, as though it couldn't possibly be anything else. But that's the problem with our bodies. They're designed to reinforce the delusion. We're born as humans because we have mixed, this is the classical view, mixed karma. We have some really good karma which has enabled us to be born as humans so that we can practice the Dharma. But we've got some really bad karma, which means that all of our senses reinforce this feeling of separation. But anyone who's meditated for any significant period of time will tell you that separation collapses. The sense of being self and other collapses, and even things like being here and there collapses, and then and now collapse as well. So you can figure this out for yourself by just sitting. You don't have to trust anyone else. You just can do it, and everyone has the same experience. For 2,500 years, everyone's had the same experience. You sit, these things happen, reality shows its face. You know, it's not a secret. 2,600 years, this has been known, publicly, widely known. You can just sit down for yourself and experience it for yourself. All right. And that concludes the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma. Does anybody have any questions? Sharon? No? Someone?
No.
No one has questions. I always think if there's no questions, it's either good, because it means, oh, everyone already knows this stuff. I don't need to carry on with it. But also it could be, have they all gone to sleep?
Well, it certainly gives you a lot to think about.
Yeah.
That's why they're called the 4 thoughts.
Mm.
Can you do all of them in one session? Like,
Oh, you don't?
you can only do one, you should only do one at a time?
I believe, and in our lineage, that's how they're done. So there's two approaches to this. So number one, when you're establishing yourself as a practitioner, so for me, the establishment phase is about 10 years long, maybe 15 years long. So, but other people will say that I'm being overly conservative, that it can be months, you know, and that I certainly know people who've progressed very quickly. So but for me, in the establishment phase, when you're really kind of like finding your legs, and it also depends on how old you are and your gender. Women find their legs quicker, and people who are older find their legs quicker as well. So, I mean, I started when I was 11. So I did not have Dharma legs. It took a long time. So, yeah, for people who are women and people who are older, it's quicker. But I think the establishment phase, however long that takes, you know, from a few years to 10, you do one at a time. So you would do human rebirth, and then when you feel you've really got that, and how do you know you've got it?
Yeah, how do you know?
You feel great gratitude for being human.
Okay.
All the time. Your life becomes filled with gratitude. And then you move on to impermanence. And then how do you know that you've got that? When
you don't weep.
Hey?
When you don't weep all the time.
Well, I still weep. No, when you have got impermanence, you totally have confidence, right, that you can become enlightened. You totally believe your mind can change. You totally believe that, because the mind is the last thing that we can really understand as impermanent, because it's so close to us. We kind of intellectually can, of course, but we just really feel it. And also, so that's number one, you feel full confidence, I can become enlightened, right? Number two, a sign that it's working. When you look at things or smell things or hear things, there's less grasping. And there's less wanting and also less aversion. Both of those are grasping. Wanting and not wanting are both grasping. They're grasping to the self's ideas about what's good and bad. So there's less aversion to things that you used to find awful, and there's less intensity to the craving for things that we have always craved. So that when that happens, then you know to move on to the next one, which is karma. And then when you really understand the proof that you've taken karma to heart is that every single decision you make, you ask the question, what's the kind thing to do here? What's the ethical thing to do here? When you literally when you cross the street, you know, you take care to not step on ants, to not bump into people, but it's natural and not fearful. It's naturally taking care of others. So that happens naturally. And then the last one, evidence that the last one has taken root is that you feel absolute disgust for all ordinary things. Absolute disgust. Just forget it, not doing it. But you feel deep joy and passion for practice. So the last one, like literally someone could have $1 million and put it in front of you and go, if you don't meditate today, you can have this $1 million. And you will go, get the hell out of here and take your money with you. You will have, there'll be no pause, no even consideration, because you know that 30 minutes is more valuable than that $1 million. So that's how you know. Now, once you've moved on, or you've got some ground in these things, we do them all together in our daily practice. So they're things that we revisit every day, all together. So my daily practice is quite short. The formal ones that I do. I'm not an advocate of formal practices, by the way, but I have some that I have committed to do. So my formal practice always opens with 4 thoughts that turn the mind. So I always do them every day. So, the focus of them and the quality of them change. So one day I might be more acutely aware of suffering. Another day I might be more acutely aware of karma, because I'm doing them together, you know. So you just sort of do them and then you sit, and then I move on with the rest of that practice.
Okay.
So there's 2 ways of doing it. You can also, there's a very, very, very short, I think it's even 2 lines. Maybe it's only 2 lines or 3 lines or something. There's a very, very short Tibetan in the Dujom tradition, just like a little aphorism kind of thing that you can say to sort of do them all at once if you want. My feeling about that is that it becomes something you do by rote. You're just sort of saying it and you're not really feeling it. But it's okay to say anyway, because just to get it in the mind, and then periodically sort of really zero in on one of them. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So, sorry. So are you saying that you work on the first one and as that sort of so that's part of your daily meditation practice. So it's a portion. It's like you introduce your meditation with that in mind. Is that right?
Yeah. So what you do is then, so we all have a daily meditation practice. And then each day, when you decide that you're going to, so this is the other thing. We all have to decide, do we want to do this? Is this something that I want to do? You know, it's not mandatory. It's something that you can choose to do or not do. And if you choose to do it, if you feel that you've got, if you feel the possibility in it, the potential in it, and you decide to do it, then you'll go, okay, for the next 3 months, you know, I'm going to, before my sitting meditation each day, I'm going to do a contemplation on human rebirth. And then you do that for 3 months. And I reckon 3 months at our age, and as women, I'm not a woman, but uses women, it is faster for women. So because there's many reasons, because I'm not going to tell you about your own experience, but it is a bit faster for women. So I reckon 3 months for a person who's a bit older, who's already been around the block and experienced some suffering and has a consistent meditation practice and is also a woman, then I think 3 months per one would be enough, I reckon. And that's what we have been told from others, from lamas. So we've been told that about 3 months is probably the shortest time that you would need. Yep. Given you've already got a daily meditation practice, because the meditation is really important for it.
Yeah.
And then after that 3 months, you move on to doing impermanence.
Right.
And then the gratitude you have for being human buoys you for dealing with the loss associated with impermanence.
Mm-hmm.
And then after you've got impermanence down pat and you really feel confident that you can be enlightened, you can become enlightened, you really feel confident, then you move on to karma. And then that confidence is, what's the word I'm looking, is constrained by ethics, because sometimes that confidence can lead us to think, oh, like I can be anything, I can do anything I want. It can lead to a kind of careless, it doesn't often, but sometimes it can lead to hedonism. Yeah. So then the ethics tapers that sense of confidence, so that it is confidence mixed with kindness. And then when you've got that, and you move on to the suffering, your joy at being human, your confidence in being able to awaken, your ethical practice, all act as shields against the suffering that you have to face. So that's why doing them in this way, I think, is quite potent. And then again, when you've done the suffering for 3 months-ish, and you start to really have total disgust. They call it disgust, but it's actually just deep disinterest, deep disinterest in anything that will take you away from your kindness or your meditation, your practice. Then you know that foundation is solid. You have a solid foundation, and then your meditation, with maybe 1 or 2 rocket launches attached, in terms of there are a couple of practices that really speed it up, should be enough actually to really get you to recognize the true nature of mind. If you know how to look, so which is why you need a teacher. Teacher tells you how to look. So, I mean, but there are texts, this might be heretical, probably is. There are texts that tell you how to look, but the general feeling is that it needs to be tailored to you as an individual. That instruction about how to look for your own nature, when you've got a stable meditation practice and you have renunciation, it can't happen until then. Then the teacher who knows you will be able to go, here's how you look, this is what you do to look. So as an example, my teachers know I'm a complete softie and tend to use, but also very averse to compliments. So they tend to use those 2 things against me. So where, like they because I'm very moved by kindness, so they act kindly, but also work against my aversion to compliments. That's what I've noticed. So they tailor it to you. It's interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've reached our time limit. Have we reached our time limit? I don't know. Any other questions? Anyone have any other questions they want to ask? Nope.
I did just have one other little thought with the whole practice too, where I don't know, for me it sort of helps sometimes to visualize or just this overall thought about how when you're practicing that you've got these outer layers that are sort of being stripped away, and whether that is that a correct sort of thing to think about.
There's no incorrect. Yeah, like whatever helps you stay in your practice, that's fine. So long as it doesn't become a thing that you think is true. So long as you understand it's a method, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so long as you understand that it might be unique to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It might not apply to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So that's
all right.
fine. Because often,
Yeah.
like when we sit, there are often things that happen that are not quite what it says in the books. But we feel that it's helping, and so in that sense it's okay, but we have to understand that it's like we want to understand that it's like a temporary thing, and we don't hang on to it, and if it drops away, we don't try and bring it back. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, I'm just sort of,
I guess, useful.
Yeah, right. I'm just sort of, I don't know. I think I'm trying to sort of see the, like, going through the whole. It's like there's a sense of gratitude with the being born human, and then at the same time, it's also ego releasing or something as well, and it's sort of just it's
Yeah, because the responsibility side of it leads us to selflessness.
Yeah. Okay. No, because I don't want to lose like the other elements that I sort of feel as though are working when I introduce this.
We just need to be open to what happens. So we might find something more effective pops up.
Okay.
Like, don't ever think, this is the thing, don't ever think this is what we need in terms of method. They're not like eternal truths.
No, okay. So just let things arise as they arise.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Like thought.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
All right. I'm going to do a dedication and we'll wind it up.
Mm-hmm.
By this effort, may all beings be free of fear, sorrow, and pain. May all beings know wellness, tranquility, and love. May all beings abide in the perfect bliss of the great perfection. Om.